The fluorescent lights of the hospital room hummed, a relentless buzz that seemed to vibrate directly inside my skull. I remember the smell, a sterile mix of antiseptic and something vaguely sweet, cloying like wilting flowers. My eyes fluttered open, heavy and unwilling, and I saw a blurry shape leaning over me. It was David, my son. His face, usually so animated, was drawn, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a glint that wasn't sorrow. Then Sarah, my daughter, appeared beside him. Her hand, cool and delicate, rested on my forehead for a moment, a gesture I might once have found comforting. But even through the fog of medication, I felt a strange distance, a calculated detachment in her touch. My throat was dry, a desert. I tried to speak, to ask what was happening, but only a raspy whisper escaped. David shushed me gently. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Everything's going to be fine." Fine for whom, I wondered, as a cold dread began to coil in my gut. My life, Elias Thorne, 65 years old, patriarch of the Thorne estate in Sterling Bay, Connecticut, had been built on hard work and perhaps too much trust. I had started with nothing, just a worn briefcase and an idea, and I had carved out an empire from raw ambition and unwavering dedication. I'd built Thorne Industries from a small manufacturing plant into a global leader, all while ensuring my family wanted for nothing. I gave my children the kind of life I could only have dreamed of. David, my eldest, always had a knack for expensive tastes. I funded his numerous ventures, each one more ill-fated than the last, from a gourmet dog food subscription service to an organic artisanal candle company. I never pushed him to join the family business, always encouraging him to pursue his passions, no matter how extravagant or unrealistic. I wrote off the losses as investments in his happiness, a father's duty. Sarah, my youngest, was equally indulged. She had a flair for interior design, so I bought her a charming boutique in downtown Sterling Bay and covered all its overhead for years, even when profits were non-existent. She lived in a beautiful colonial house, mortgage-free, a gift from me on her 30th birthday. I believed in providing them with every opportunity, every comfort, every security. I imagined them thriving, growing, perhaps eventually taking the reins of my legacy, or at least building their own. I saw them as extensions of my own dreams, reflections of the love I poured into them. My wife Alina had passed away 10 years ago, leaving a void I never truly filled, but my children had been my anchor, my reason for enduring. I had always envisioned a future where we would share holidays at the estate, filled with laughter and grandchildren, where I could watch them enjoy the fruits of my labor, not just financially, but in the peace and stability it brought. I was their safety net, their provider, their unwavering supporter, and I thought they loved me for it. I thought they loved me, period. This hospital room, however, felt less like a place of healing and more like a waiting room for something else entirely. The air was thick with unspoken words, with a subtle tension that pricked at my semi-conscious state. I heard snippets of conversations between David and Sarah, hushed tones that stopped abruptly when I stirred. They spoke of arrangements and the inevitable. My mind, though cloudy, began to connect the dots, faint at first, then sharper, clearer. They weren't talking about my recovery. They were talking about my departure, and I couldn't shake the chilling feeling that they were not merely accepting it, but perhaps even anticipating it. The moment of truth arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet rustle of paper and the hushed, almost conspiratorial tones of my children. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, the world around me a blurry dream, a distant echo. The doctors had given me a grim prognosis after my sudden collapse, a severe cardiac event, they called it. They spoke of life support, of difficult choices. I was too weak, too muddled to fully understand, or so they thought. But the human mind, even when shrouded in illness, can cling to fragments, to sensations, to words. I remember the nurse coming in, her voice gentle, asking David and Sarah if they were sure, if they understood the implications. And I heard David's clear, firm response. "Yes, doctor, we understand perfectly. It's what Dad would have wanted. He wouldn't want to live like this." Sarah chimed in, her voice laced with what sounded like feigned sorrow. "He always said he wouldn't want to be a burden." Burden. The word cut through the haze like a shard of ice. Elias Thorne, a burden. the man who had spent his entire life building, providing, protecting. As if on cue, a document was placed before them. I couldn't make out the words, but the stark black and white, the official seal, screamed importance. I saw David's hand, steady and confident, grasp the pen. I watched as he signed his name, a flourish I knew so well. Then Sarah, her hand trembling slightly but her resolve evident, followed suit. My do not resuscitate order. They had signed it. My own children, the flesh of my flesh, the recipients of my boundless generosity, had just sealed my fate. They believed I was too far gone, too close to the edge to comprehend. They believed I would simply slip away, a convenient end to a life they now saw as an obstacle to their ambitions. The pain that shot through me was not physical. It was a searing agony in my chest, a spiritual wound far deeper than any cardiac event. It was the pain of absolute, profound betrayal. My world, which I had so carefully constructed around the pillars of family and loyalty, didn't just crumble. It exploded into a million shards, each one sharp and unforgiving. I lay there motionless, my eyes barely slits, my breathing shallow, playing the part of the dying man they so desperately wanted me to be. But inside, a fire had ignited. A cold, steady flame of disbelief, of rage, of a terrible, quiet resolution. They wanted me gone so they could inherit my fortune faster. They saw my life not as precious but as a delay. The millions I had meticulously built, the legacy I had hoped to leave them, was now the very thing they wished me dead for. I could hear them discussing the estate, the properties, the investments, their voices hushed but eager. The Sterling Bay house will be perfect for Sarah, David mused. And the summer home in Nantucket, that's mine, obviously. Sarah giggled softly. I'll finally be able to expand the boutique without worrying about expenses, maybe open a second location. Their words, like daggers, twisted in the fresh wound. They were already dividing my spoils before I had even drawn my last breath. I heard David say, "We just need to make sure the will is executed quickly, no complications." And Sarah's reply, "Don't worry, Dad always kept everything in order. It'll be a seamless transition, seamless transition." My heart, which had just been on the brink of failure, beat with a new, fierce rhythm. It was a rhythm of survival, of cunning, of a promise of retribution. They thought I was a goner, a senile old man who had made his peace with the world. They thought they had won, but they had profoundly underestimated Elia's thorn. They didn't know the steel that ran through my veins, the determination that had built an empire from nothing. They had just poked a sleeping dragon, and soon, very soon, they would feel its breath. The days that followed were a torturous charade. I continued to play the part of the fading patriarch, my strength slowly returning but my expressions carefully masked. I would stir, offer weak smiles, respond with single words, allowing them to believe I was still in a fog, still teetering on the precipice. Meanwhile, my mind was a whirlwind of calculations, a labyrinth of plans. I listened. I observed. I memorized every casual, cruel remark, every covetous glance they cast at my supposed possessions. I watched them interact with the nurses, with the doctors, their faces a picture of concerned grief, a performance worthy of an Academy Award. They spoke of my deteriorating condition with practiced sorrow, while I knew, deep down, that my recovery was accelerating. My determination was my medicine. The first step was to get out of that hospital, unnoticed. I knew I couldn't trust anyone from my immediate circle, not yet. My longtime personal assistant, Martha, bless her loyal soul, was away visiting her sister in Florida, a fortunate coincidence that ensured my secrets would remain safe. I decided I would feign a slight improvement, enough to convince the medical staff that I was stable enough to be transferred to a rehabilitation facility, a place less under the constant watchful eyes of my children. During one of my more lucid moments, I subtly inquired about such a facility, mentioning a preference for one known for its privacy and individualized care, knowing full well it would be a place where I could begin my real recovery and my true work. My children, eager to move me out of the expensive hospital and closer to their perceived inheritance, readily agreed. "Yes, Dad, whatever makes you comfortable," David said, patting my hand with a sickeningly paternal air. "We want the best for you." The best for them meant out of sight, out of mind. The day I was transferred, I made my move. I convinced the new facility staff that I needed absolute quiet, no visitors for the first week, citing the need for intensive rest and recovery after my ordeal. They, unaware of the deeper game, respected my wishes. Once safely ensconced in a private room, I initiated Phase 2. The first call was to my oldest and most trusted friend, John Harrison, my attorney for over 40 years. He was the only man I could implicitly trust, a man whose discretion was as legendary as his legal prowess. I didn't mince words. I told him everything: the DNR, the overheard conversations, the betrayal. There was a pause on the other end, a stunned silence, then a low, steady voice. "Elias, my friend, I'm so sorry. What do you need me to do?" My voice, though still a little weak, was clear, firm. "I need you to prepare a new will, John, a completely new will. And I need you to do it in absolute secrecy. Not a word to anyone, especially not David or Sarah." John, a seasoned professional, understood immediately. He knew the intricate details of my previous will, the generous provisions for my children. He knew the sheer magnitude of what I was proposing. Over the next few weeks, as I diligently worked on my physical recovery, building back my strength with the help of dedicated therapists who knew nothing of my personal drama, John and I meticulously crafted the new documents. My old will had divided my estate, estimated at over $200 million, almost entirely between David and Sarah, with generous trusts for future grandchildren. The new will, it was a masterpiece of legal precision and elegant justice. My children's names were conspicuously absent from any major inheritance. Instead, I established a substantial charitable foundation, the Eleanor Thorne Legacy Foundation, dedicated to supporting medical research and arts education, causes my late wife had deeply cared about. I included provisions for my loyal staff, including Martha, ensuring their financial security for life. A distant cousin, a hardworking and humble man named Thomas who had always treated me with genuine respect, received a significant portion to help him expand his struggling farm. And for David and Sarah, a symbolic, paltry sum of exactly $1 each for services rendered in hastening my demise, as I dictated with a grim satisfaction. John, for all his professionalism, had to clear his throat to suppress a chuckle. "That's quite poetic, Elias," he said, a twinkle in his eye. While John worked on the legalities, I gathered my own evidence. I had always been meticulous about my finances, keeping detailed records. I reviewed years of bank statements, tracing every transfer, every loan to my children that was never repaid, every expense I covered for their extravagant lifestyles. It was a staggering sum, far more than I had realized. This wasn't just about the new will, it was about exposing the full extent of their parasitic behavior. I instructed John to prepare a detailed financial summary, a stark accounting of their greed that would accompany the new will. Meanwhile, David and Sarah, completely oblivious to the impending storm, continued their premature celebrations. I would occasionally call them from the rehabilitation facility, feigning lingering weakness, listening as they spoke of their plans. "I'm looking at a new yacht, Dad," David once boasted, assuming my slow response was due to my fading faculties. "Something really impressive for the summer. You always said I should enjoy my life." Sarah, on another call, excitedly detailed plans for renovating her Sterling Bay house, a house I was still very much alive and living in. "The kitchen needs a complete overhaul, Dad, darling. I'm thinking marble countertops and a professional-grade range. It's going to be fabulous for when I host my charity galas." Charity galas. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. They were spending my money before it was even legally theirs, confident in my imminent death. They saw me as nothing more than a temporary inconvenience, a last hurdle before they could dive headfirst into their perceived inheritance. Their arrogance grew with each passing day. They would occasionally visit me, bringing small gifts, feigning concern, but their eyes always darted around my room, as if mentally cataloging the items they would soon claim. They even suggested moving some of my smaller, more valuable possessions from the estate to secure locations for safekeeping, no doubt meaning their own homes. I politely, weakly declined, citing a sentimental attachment. They didn't push, confident they would soon have everything. They were so utterly convinced of their victory, so sure they had outsmarted the old man, that they missed the steely glint in my eyes, the subtle tightening of my jaw, the quiet strength that was returning to my body and my spirit. They believed I was on my way out. Little did they know I was simply preparing for my grand entrance. The day arrived with a crisp autumn chill, a fitting backdrop for the cold reality that was about to unfold. I had orchestrated everything meticulously, down to the smallest detail. My rehabilitation was complete, my body stronger than it had been in years, my mind sharper than ever. I had officially checked out of the facility, telling the staff I was returning home to Thorn Estate. My children were, naturally, unaware of this. I wanted the element of surprise, the shock value. I had arranged for a private car to take me not directly to the estate, but to a tailor for a custom-fitted suit, then to a barber for a sharp, modern haircut. I wanted to look not like a man who had narrowly escaped death, but like a man reborn, ready for battle. While I was at the tailor, I received a call from David. His voice was filled with an uncharacteristic urgency. "Dad, we're having a small gathering tonight at the estate," he said, barely concealing his excitement. "Just a few close family friends. We thought it would be nice to celebrate your recovery and to discuss some important family matters." Important family matters. I knew exactly what that meant. They planned to open my old will to formally begin the process of carving up my estate. They believed I was either too weak to object or too compliant to care. "That sounds lovely, David," I replied, my voice calm, almost serene. "What time should I arrive?" David seemed surprised by my ready acceptance. "Oh, around 7 o'clock, Dad. We'll have everything ready." Everything ready for them to plunder. Perfect. I arrived at Thorn Estate precisely at 7 o'clock, not in my usual unassuming sedan, but in a sleek black chauffeured car, a vehicle I had never owned. The driver, a tall, imposing man, opened the door for me. As I stepped out onto the familiar cobblestone driveway, the lights of the estate glowed warmly, casting long shadows. Through the large bay window of the living room, I could see them all gathered. David and Sarah, their spouses, a few of their closest friends who had always hovered around them like vultures, and my longtime lawyer, John Harrison, looking rather uncomfortable but resolute. They were all dressed impeccably, a somber elegance befitting what they thought was a solemn occasion. A memorial, perhaps, for the man who was still very much alive. I took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs, a feeling of pure, potent anticipation coursing through me. I walked deliberately, slowly, savoring each step towards the front door. The butler, old Higgins, who had served me faithfully for 30 years, opened the door, his eyes wide with surprise, then relief, then a flicker of understanding when he saw the look on my face. "Mr. Thorne," he whispered, a genuine smile breaking through his usual stoicism. "It's good to see you, sir, very good." "Indeed, Higgins," I said, my voice strong, steady. "It's good to be back." I straightened my new suit, took another deep breath, and walked into the living room. The room fell silent. It wasn't the silence of respect, but of absolute, horrified shock. David, who had been holding a glass of scotch, dropped it. The crystal shattered on the Persian rug, but no one seemed to notice. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face draining of all color, turning ashen. Her husband, Mark, stumbled backward, knocking over a small side table. The air was thick with disbelief, with fear. I stood there, framed in the doorway, my presence undeniable, unyielding. I looked each of them in the eye. David, his jaw hanging open, his face a grotesque mask of confusion and terror. Sarah, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears that I knew were not for me, but for her shattered dreams of wealth. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational, amplified by the sudden, suffocating silence. "I trust I haven't interrupted anything important." David finally managed to stammer, "Dad, but you were, the hospital said." He couldn't finish the sentence. "The hospital said I was gravely ill, yes," I finished for him, a cold smile touching my lips. "And for a while I was. But as you can see, I've made a remarkable recovery. A true testament to the power of a strong will, wouldn't you say?" My gaze swept over David and Sarah, lingering for a moment. They flinched. "Indeed," John Harrison spoke up, stepping forward, a small, knowing smile on his face. Elias has made a full and quite astonishing recovery. He then turned to David and Sarah, and he's here to discuss those important family matters you mentioned, David. I walked further into the room, my steps confident, purposeful. I pulled out a chair and sat down, my demeanor entirely composed. Please, everyone, take a seat, I urged, gesturing to the still paralyzed group. We have much to discuss, specifically my will. David finally found his voice, a high-pitched, panicked squeak. Your will, but John already has your will, Dad. We were just about to review it. He glanced nervously at John, who simply raised an eyebrow. Ah, but that was my old will, David, I corrected him, my voice dripping with an almost saccharine sweetness. A will that, I must confess, no longer accurately reflects my wishes. You see, a near-death experience, particularly one hastened by certain, shall we say, family decisions, tends to clarify one's perspective. Sarah, her voice barely a whisper, managed. What are you talking about, Dad? My eyes locked onto hers, cold and unwavering. I'm talking about the do not resuscitate order, Sarah. The one you and David so readily signed. The one that, had I truly been as weak as you hoped, would have ensured my swift and uncomplicated demise. Forgive me for being so inconveniently resilient. Her face crumpled. David's eyes darted around the room, desperate, cornered. The other guests, now fully understanding the gravity of the situation, stared at David and Sarah with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. John, I said, turning to my lawyer, would you be so kind as to retrieve my new will? I believe it's in your briefcase. John nodded, a triumphant glint in his eye, and produced a thick, red-bound document from his bag. He laid it on the coffee table, a stark contrast to the shattered crystal and the hushed terror in the room. And for clarity, I continued, addressing David and Sarah directly, my voice now devoid of any pretense of warmth, I have also prepared a detailed financial summary. It outlines every dollar I have loaned you, every expense I have covered, every luxurious whim I have indulged over the past decade. It's quite a substantial document, truly. You might find it illuminating, especially considering your current financial situations. Their faces were studies in abject misery. They opened their mouths, tried to speak, but no words came out. Their carefully constructed world, built on my anticipated death, was crumbling before their very eyes, and I, Elias Thorne, was standing in the wreckage, calm and utterly victorious. The silence in the room stretched, thick with dread, broken only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. John Harrison, ever the professional, broke the tension. Perhaps I should begin by reading the preamble, Elias, he suggested, his voice steady. I nodded, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. Please do, John. I want them to hear every word. John cleared his throat, picked up the new will, and began to read. His words, clear and resonant, filled the stunned room. He read about my lifelong dedication to building Thorne Industries, my unwavering commitment to my family, and then the devastating blow. However, he read, his gaze sweeping over David and Sarah, due to a profound and unforgivable act of betrayal and a demonstrable disregard for my well-being and life, committed by my children, David Thorne and Sarah Thorne, in a calculated attempt to hasten my demise for financial gain, I, Elias Thorne, have made significant alterations to my last will and testament. David let out a strangled cry, a sound of pure anguish and disbelief. Sarah buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Their spouses looked utterly mortified, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and dawning horror. John continued, detailing the new provisions. He spoke of the Eleanor Thorne Legacy Foundation, explaining its purpose and the vast sums of money dedicated to it. He named my loyal staff, one by one, and specified the generous trusts established for them. He then moved on to my distant cousin Thomas, outlining the substantial inheritance that would enable him to secure his farm and provide for his family. Each clause was a nail in the coffin of David and Sarah's avarice. Then came the part I had anticipated most keenly. John paused, looking directly at my children, his voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. Finally, concerning my children, David Thorne and Sarah Thorne, it is my express and unequivocal wish that they receive no portion of my estate, save for a symbolic sum of $1 United States each. This sum is granted to them as a token of my lasting disappointment and as an acknowledgment of the services they rendered in attempting to expedite my passage from this life." The words hung in the air, damning and absolute. David sprang to his feet, his face contorted with rage. "This is insane. You can't do this, Dad. This is elder abuse. We'll contest this. We'll take you to court." Sarah looked up, her face tear-streaked and blotchy. "How could you, after everything? You're our father. Your father who was left for dead by his own children," I retorted, my voice calm, cutting through their hysterics like a scalpel. "Your father who overheard you discussing how quickly you could divvy up my belongings. Your father who watched you sign the document that would have let him die. Don't speak to me of fatherhood, David. Don't speak to me of loyalty, Sarah." John Harrison then stepped in, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "David, please. I must advise you, as your father's legal counsel for over 4 decades, that this will is ironclad. Elias has been of sound mind, fully capable, and has meticulously documented all his decisions. Any attempt to contest it would be futile and would only incur significant legal costs you cannot afford, especially in light of the accompanying financial summary." With that, he slid a thick folder across the coffee table towards David and Sarah. It was the detailed accounting of their extravagance, the loans, the gifts, the endless drain on my resources. "This document," John continued, "details all the funds Elias has provided to both of you over the years, without expectation of repayment. Given your current lack of independent income and your lifestyle, the IRS may take a rather keen interest in these gifts, now that the source has decided to dry up." The color drained from David's face once more. Sarah stared at the document, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear, not just of losing their inheritance, but of facing actual consequences for their decades of irresponsible living. "And let's not forget," I added, leaning forward slightly, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone, "the matter of the do not resuscitate order. While it might not be legally actionable in itself, the intent, coupled with the witnesses to your conversations, paints a rather clear picture of undue influence and, frankly, attempted elder abuse. I have decided not to press charges, out of what little familial feeling remains, but I assure you, the evidence is compelling." Their friends, who had been silently watching the spectacle, now began to shuffle nervously, exchanging uneasy glances. One by one, they mumbled their excuses and slipped out of the room, leaving David and Sarah utterly alone in their humiliation. "As of this evening," I continued, rising slowly, "the homes I purchased for both of you, the boutique, the cars, all of it, are now officially transferred into the Eleanor Thorne Legacy Foundation. You have 30 days to vacate the premises and remove your personal belongings. Any attempt to damage the property will be met with immediate legal action." Sarah burst into fresh tears, not quiet sobs now, but loud, wailing cries of despair. "But where will we go? What will we do?" she wailed. "You expect us to be homeless." "Homeless," I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You expect me to believe that two able-bodied adults who have lived lives of unbridled privilege are incapable of supporting themselves. Perhaps now you will finally learn the value of a dollar, something I tried in vain to teach you for decades." David, defeated, slumped back into his chair, his head in his hands. His earlier bluster had vanished, replaced by a profound, agonizing realization of the depth of his loss. The Thorne estate, my home, once a symbol of my love and generosity, was now the site of their spectacular downfall. I looked at them, truly looked at them, and saw not the children I had raised, but two strangers consumed by avarice, their faces etched with the consequences of their choices. There was no joy in their suffering, only a hollow sense of justice. It was a victory, yes, but a costly one, purchased at the price of my own children's love. As I turned to leave the room, leaving them to their shattered dreams, John Harrison placed a hand on my arm. "Elias," he said softly, "are you sure you want to be alone tonight?" I shook my head. "No, John, I have plans. I plan to finally sleep peacefully, knowing that my legacy will be used for good, not for greed." The door clicked shut behind me, sealing their fate. The silence I left them in was no longer an anticipation of death, but the deafening echo of their own betrayal. In the aftermath, the consequences for David and Sarah were swift and brutal. The 30-day eviction notice was enforced without compromise. I made sure of it. They tried to appeal, to beg, to threaten, but my resolve was absolute. John Harrison handled all the legalities, ensuring a smooth transition of the properties and assets into the Eleanor Thorne Legacy Foundation. The house I had bought for Sarah, the one she had planned to renovate with marble and professional appliances, was indeed renovated, but not by her. It was refurbished and converted into a temporary housing facility for families displaced by natural disasters, funded by the foundation. The boutique she owned, which had always been a drain on my resources, was sold, its proceeds contributing to the foundation's medical research grants. David's various investments that I had so foolishly propped up collapsed entirely without my financial backing. The yacht he had been eyeing was never purchased. Instead, he found himself without a substantial income, relying on the meager savings he had managed to squirrel away from my allowances. The financial summary John had given them proved to be a critical document. The tax authorities, upon hearing rumors of the family dispute and my substantial estate, launched an investigation into the years of undeclared gifts and loans I had provided to my children. They faced mounting legal fees and potential penalties, a debt that would shadow them for years. The social repercussions were equally severe. News of the dramatic reading of the DNR and of my spectacular return spread like wildfire through Sterling Bay's elite circles. Our small, affluent community thrived on gossip, and this was a scandal of epic proportions. David and Sarah, once staples of the local social scene, were suddenly pariahs. Invitations stopped coming. Old friends, uncomfortable with their blatant greed and disrespect, distanced themselves. Their spouses, too, suffered the fallout, eventually leading to the collapse of their marriages under the immense pressure of financial ruin and public shame. I heard whispers of David attempting to start new ventures, each one failing spectacularly as his reputation preceded him. Sarah, stripped of her boutique and her grand house, was forced to take a low-paying job at a local department store, a stark contrast to the lavish lifestyle she had always known. The irony was not lost on me. The wealth they had so desperately craved, the fortune they believed would solve all their problems, had instead become the instrument of their undoing. They had wanted my money without me, and now they had neither. For me, life at Thorne Estate took on a new, unexpected tranquility. The vast house, once filled with the phantom echoes of family gatherings and the subtle tension of their unspoken demands, now felt truly mine again. I found peace in the quiet evenings, the solitude no longer lonely but contemplative. I spent my days actively involved with the Eleanor Thorne Legacy Foundation, ensuring its funds were used wisely and ethically. I met with the brilliant researchers whose work we supported, saw the grateful faces of the artists who received grants, and visited the families who found solace in our temporary housing. This, I realized, was a far more meaningful legacy than any amount of money squandered on ungrateful children. I reconnected with distant relatives, like my cousin Thomas, whose farm was now thriving thanks to the foundation's investment. He was a good man, honest and hardworking, and I found genuine companionship in his visits and his simple, grounded perspective. He brought me fresh produce from his fields, and we would sit on the porch, discussing crops and community, a world away from the cutthroat corporate battles I had once fought. The ache of betrayal never fully vanished. It was a scar, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the corrupting power of greed. But the searing pain had dulled, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. I had chosen justice over blind loyalty, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not just my fortune, but my dignity, my autonomy, my very life. I learned that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the peace of one's conscience, the integrity of one's actions, and the genuine connections one fosters. My children, in their rapacious pursuit of my fortune, had revealed their true selves. And in their downfall, I had discovered my own strength, my own unwavering spirit. Loyalty, I now understood, was a two-way street, paved not with expectation but with mutual respect and genuine affection. And while the path to true justice can be long and arduous, the peace it brings in the end is truly priceless. I looked out over the rolling lawns of Thorn Estate, bathed in the soft glow of a setting sun. The air was crisp, the silence profound. I was not just a survivor. I was a man reborn, ready to live out my days on my own terms, surrounded by purpose, and forever free from the suffocating grasp of greed. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing their fate. The silence I left them in was no longer an anticipation of death, but the deafening echo of their own betrayal. As I walked away from the living room, leaving David and Sarah amidst the ruins of their greedy fantasies, a profound sense of calm settled over me. It wasn't the triumphant roar I might have expected, but a quiet, almost melancholic peace. The battle was won, but the wounds of a father's heart, though healing, would leave their indelible scars. Higgins, my ever-loyal butler, was waiting for me in the foyer. His face, usually a mask of professional neutrality, now showed a deep, genuine sympathy. "Would you care for a drink, Mr. Thorne?" he asked, his voice low and respectful. "Perhaps a brandy," I nodded. "That would be most welcome, Higgins. And please inform the staff that I will be having a quiet evening. No further disturbances." As I settled into my study, the warm glow of the fireplace a welcome contrast to the chill outside, Higgins brought me a snifter of my favorite cognac. The rich, amber liquid warmed me from the inside out, matching the slow, steady burn of satisfaction in my chest. I looked around the room at the leather-bound books, the antique desk, the photographs of Alina and me from happier times. This was my sanctuary, my home, a place they had coveted but would never truly possess. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal technicalities, as John Harrison meticulously executed the new will. David and Sarah, of course, did not go quietly. Their initial shock gave way to furious indignation. They tried to contest the will, arguing undue influence and temporary insanity on my part. But John had anticipated this. Every step of my recovery, every conversation, every instruction had been documented, witnessed, and notarized. There were psychiatric evaluations confirming my sound mind, medical reports detailing my remarkable recovery, and a comprehensive timeline of their own avaricious actions. The court, seeing the overwhelming evidence, dismissed their claims swiftly. The judge's words, relayed to me by John, were scathing, accusing them of a deplorable lack of filial piety and unconscionable opportunism. The media, ever hungry for scandal, latched onto the story. "Thorne Empire heirless, children disinherited after attempted death sentence on father," screamed one headline. "Revenge of the resilient patriarch. Thorne rewrites will, leaves greedy offspring $1 each," declared another. The public humiliation was immediate and widespread. Sterling Bay, a town that revered old money and respectable families, turned its back on David and Sarah with a swiftness that was almost cruel. David's attempts to portray himself as a wronged son only backfired, his desperate pleas for sympathy perceived as further proof of his self-serving nature. Sarah, who had always prided herself on her social standing, found herself uninvited from charity galas and society events she once chaired. Her boutique, once a hub of local gossip and exclusive merchandise, quickly faltered without my financial injections and her newfound pariah status. I had instructed John to begin the 30-day eviction process for the properties I had given them. This was not an act of vindictiveness, but a necessary step to secure the assets for the foundation. Sarah, in her fury, initially threatened to destroy the colonial house I had gifted her, to leave it in ruins as a final act of spite. But John, with a calm, measured warning about criminal charges and the further tarnishing of her already ruined reputation, convinced her otherwise. She vacated, leaving behind a home that felt hollow, stripped of the life she had once envisioned for herself there. David, ever the more pragmatic, though no less self-absorbed, tried to salvage what he could. He attempted to sell off some of his more valuable personal possessions, luxury cars, designer watches, rare wines, but his credit was already in shambles. The financial summary I had provided to John, detailing years of unaccounted-for loans and gifts from me, had indeed piqued the interest of the IRS. They launched an audit, scrutinizing his lavish lifestyle and his various failed ventures, demanding repayment for undeclared income. The millions he thought he would inherit vanished, replaced by mounting debts and the chilling prospect of a tax evasion investigation. His wife, Maria, a woman who had married him primarily for his perceived inheritance and social standing, filed for divorce within weeks. The settlement left David with little more than the clothes on his back and a mountain of legal bills. She cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone in Sterling Bay knew the truth. She wasn't marrying into old money, she was marrying into old debt, and she wanted out. Sarah's husband, Mark, a man whose quiet demeanor often hid his own aspirations for a comfortable life, also began divorce proceedings. He was less dramatic than Maria, but equally resolute. He had invested his own modest savings into Sarah's boutique, only to see it flounder and now, legally, pass into the foundation's hands. He felt betrayed not by me but by Sarah's reckless greed. She was left not only without a home or a business, but also without the stability she had always taken for granted. The boutique, once a symbol of her ambition, was indeed sold. The proceeds, substantial even after its decline, went directly into the Eleanor Thorne Legacy Foundation. We repurposed the colonial house I had given her. It became the Thorne Family Respite, a temporary sanctuary for local families who had lost their homes to unforeseen circumstances, fires, floods, or other personal tragedies. I visited it often, seeing children play in the garden Sarah had once carefully curated, hearing the laughter of families finding a fresh start within its walls. It was a far cry from marble countertops and charity galas, but it held a warmth and genuine purpose that Sarah's boutique never could. David, with his entrepreneurial spirit now completely untethered from my deep pockets, floundered. He tried to revive his gourmet dog food subscription service, then an online luxury car rental startup, but without seed money, without my network, and with his now infamous reputation, every venture was stillborn. He was a man who had never truly learned to earn a dollar, only to spend one. He spiraled, taking odd jobs that barely covered his rent, his expensive tastes now a torment, a constant reminder of the life he had so carelessly thrown away. I heard whispers of him living in a cramped apartment above a bar, struggling to pay for basic necessities. The irony was palpable. The man who had dreamed of yachts now struggled to afford a decent meal. Sarah, stripped of her identity as a society darling, eventually found work. She became a sales associate at Sterling Bay's largest department store, working long hours for minimum wage. I never saw her there myself, but I heard reports from loyal employees who quietly sympathized, though none dared to speak ill of me. Her artistic flair, once indulged on lavish interiors, was now used to arrange mannequins and fold sweaters. The stark reality of manual labor and financial struggle was a bitter pill for a woman who had never known want. I found no joy in their suffering, no celebratory dances. Their downfall was not a source of gleeful vindication, but a solemn affirmation that justice, however harsh, had been served. The pain of their betrayal was still a dull ache, a phantom limb of what I had once considered my family. But it was no longer a consuming fire. It was a scar, a reminder of a lesson learned at a terrible cost. My own life, meanwhile, blossomed in unexpected ways. The Thorne estate, once a symbol of my corporate success and familial aspirations, became a true home. The silence that once felt empty now felt rich with possibility. Martha, my loyal personal assistant, returned from Florida, aghast at the news. Her fierce loyalty to me was a balm to my soul. She had known David and Sarah since they were children, and her disappointment in them was profound. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I always told you they were spoiled, but I never imagined." I simply held up a hand. "Let's not dwell on what was, Martha. Let us focus on what can be." She became an invaluable asset to the Eleanor Thorne Legacy Foundation, organizing its rapidly expanding operations with her characteristic efficiency and dedication. Together, we oversaw its growth. We funded groundbreaking research into cardiovascular diseases, a cause close to my heart after my own brush with death. I personally reviewed grant applications, meeting with brilliant young scientists whose passion rekindled a spark of my own youthful ambition. The gratitude in their eyes, the genuine excitement for their work, was a reward far more satisfying than any corporate profit. We also expanded our arts education programs, fulfilling a leaner's dream of making creative opportunities accessible to underprivileged children. I attended recitals and art exhibitions, watching these young talents flourish, knowing that my late wife's spirit lived on in every brushstroke and every note played. It brought a profound sense of purpose to my golden years, a legacy built on genuine impact rather than mere accumulation. My relationship with my distant cousin Thomas deepened considerably. He was a simple, honest man who valued hard work and community. The foundation's investment had not only saved his struggling farm, but transformed it into a thriving organic enterprise, providing fresh produce to local schools and hospitals. He often visited the estate, bringing baskets of his harvest, and we would sit on the wide veranda, sipping iced tea, discussing everything from crop rotations to the changing seasons. His grounded perspective, his unpretentious joy, was a refreshing contrast to the superficiality that had dominated so much of my previous life. He never spoke of David or Sarah, understanding intuitively that I had moved on. He simply offered his companionship, a quiet strength that was precisely what I needed. I found myself appreciating the simpler pleasures of life. Long walks through the estate's sprawling gardens, the gentle rustle of leaves in the autumn breeze, the warmth of the sun on my face. I read more, delving into history and philosophy, expanding my mind in ways I had put aside for decades in my relentless pursuit of building Thorn Industries. I began to keep a journal, not to relive the past, but to reflect on the present, to document the lessons learned. I wrote about the true meaning of legacy, about the delicate balance between provision and indulgence, about the profound responsibility of wealth. I realized that for too long, I had equated love with material provision, believing that showering my children with luxuries would guarantee their affection and loyalty. It was a naive, costly mistake. True love, I now understood, was forged in shared values, in mutual respect, in genuine care for another's well-being, not in the endless fulfillment of superficial desires. My children had confused my generosity with a bottomless well, and my love with a bank account. They had never learned the fundamental lesson that everything has a cost, and some costs are paid not in dollars, but in the irreversible loss of trust and connection. The quiet solitude of Thorn Estate, once a painful reminder of Alina's absence and my children's distant lives, now felt like a refuge, a sanctuary where I could truly be myself. The grand rooms, once filled with the phantom echoes of holidays and forced family gatherings, now resonated with the purposeful hum of the Foundation's work and the genuine laughter of those we helped. I watched the seasons change, from the vibrant greens of summer to the fiery hues of autumn, and then to the hushed white of winter, and with each passing season I felt myself shedding the burdens of the past. The bitterness slowly receded, leaving behind a clear, sharp understanding of human nature. I had made mistakes, yes, but I had also learned, adapted, and ultimately found a new path. There were still moments, brief flashes, when the memory of their betrayal would sting. A particular song, a familiar scent, a glimpse of a child laughing with a parent would conjure images of what I had hoped for my family. But those moments were fleeting, quickly replaced by the quiet satisfaction of the present. My life was now filled with genuine purpose, with meaningful connections, with the profound knowledge that my efforts were making a tangible difference in the world. I had not just survived, I had thrived. I had not just inflicted vengeance, I had enacted justice, transforming a personal tragedy into a lasting legacy of good. The Thorn name, once associated with industry and wealth, was now intertwined with philanthropy, compassion, and true human impact. I often thought about the nature of my silken vengeance. It had not been violent, nor had it been cruel in the conventional sense. It was the elegant unraveling of their entitlements, the systematic dismantling of their assumed future, allowing them to face the natural consequences of their own choices. They had wanted to dispose of me, to clear the path to my fortune. In return, I had cleared the path to their own destitution, forcing them to confront the emptiness of lives built solely on avarice. I had given them the freedom they had always craved, the freedom from my rules, my expectations, and ultimately my money. And in that freedom, they had found their true prison. A life without purpose, without earned dignity, without the respect of others, and most painfully, without the security they had so foolishly believed was their birthright. My final days, whenever they came, would be spent not in a hospital room filled with the sterile hum of machinery and the calculating whispers of ungrateful children, but here, at Thorn Estate, surrounded by the echoes of a life well lived, a legacy honorably bestowed, and the profound peace that only true justice can bring. The sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. I closed my journal, feeling a profound sense of completeness. My story was not one of simple revenge, but of redemption, of reclaiming my life and purpose from the very brink of betrayal. And in that, I found a peace more valuable than all the Thorn fortune combined. This profound peace, which had settled over me like the gentle autumn light, was not a final destination, but the quiet, flowing river that carried me through the years that followed. It was a peace born of conviction, sustained by purpose, and deepened by the wisdom gleaned from my trials. My recovery had been more than physical, it was a spiritual and emotional rebirth. My heart, once fractured by betrayal, had mended scar tissue stronger than the original, now beating with a rhythm of quiet determination and unwavering resolve. Each morning, I would wake in my familiar bed at Thorn Estate, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, no longer feeling the shadow of an uncertain future or the subtle dread of family expectation. Instead, there was a lightness to my being, a sense of liberation. My first act would often be a quiet meditation in the vast, perfectly manicured gardens, the very grounds that David and Sarah had once mentally earmarked for their own opulent follies. Now these gardens were a source of solace and reflection, their beauty a testament to growth and renewal, much like my own life. The Alina Thorn Legacy Foundation, under Martha's meticulous management and my active guidance, blossomed into a formidable force for good. We expanded our reach far beyond Sterling Bay. The Cardiovascular Research Center, which had been so close to my own near demise, became a beacon of innovation, attracting top scientists from around the globe. I established a regular endowment fund, ensuring its cutting-edge work would continue for generations. I received heartfelt letters from families whose loved ones had been saved by the treatments developed there, each one a poignant reminder of the true meaning of my wealth. These were the true dividends, the genuine returns on my life's investments. Our arts education programs also flourished. We partnered with inner-city schools, creating after-school programs that offered a sanctuary for children in disadvantaged communities. I personally funded a scholarship program, sending talented young artists and musicians to prestigious academies, ensuring their gifts would not be wasted. I attended their graduation ceremonies, seeing the bright promise in their eyes, the proud smiles of their parents. These young people, full of potential and gratitude, were the grandchildren I never truly had, the legacy of spirit and intellect that far surpassed any biological ties. My cousin Thomas, a man of simple dignity, became a constant presence in my life, a living embodiment of the values I now held dear. His organic farm, Thorn Family Fields, expanded, not through reckless ambition, but through sustainable practices and genuine care for the land. He employed several local families, offering fair wages and a sense of community that was rare in our modern world. Our conversations on the veranda often stretched into the twilight hours, discussing not only farming, but life, philosophy, and the quiet joys of a well-lived existence. He reminded me of the profound satisfaction that comes from honest labor and selfless contribution, a stark contrast to the hollow pursuits of my own children. John Harrison, my steadfast attorney, continued to manage my legal affairs, but his role had evolved. He was no longer just a lawyer, but a trusted friend and confidant. We would often share a glass of scotch in my study, reflecting on the intricacies of human nature, the enduring power of justice, and the peculiar ways in which life unfolds. He would occasionally provide updates on David and Sarah, always with a detached, professional tone, but I could sense his own quiet disappointment in their continued failures. He once remarked, "Elias, they had everything handed to them and they still managed to bankrupt themselves, not just financially but morally." I nodded, knowing the truth of his words. David's life remained a tragic comedy of errors. He drifted from one low-paying, soul-crushing job to another, his expensive tastes now a source of perpetual torment. He tried to rekindle his relationship with Maria, but she had moved on, building a new life free from his endless demands. His social circle, once robust, had completely evaporated. He was often seen lurking around Sterling Bay, a shadow of his former self, his clothes rumpled, his once animated face etched with bitterness and regret. He would sometimes send me frantic, rambling letters, filled with accusations and pleas for help, always blaming me, never taking responsibility. I would read them with a heavy heart, then file them away, knowing that no amount of money could fix the emptiness within him. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed to have retreated entirely from the public eye. Her stint at the department store was short-lived. She couldn't adapt to the demands. I heard she eventually left Sterling Bay, moving to a small, nondescript town far away, seeking anonymity. Her delicate constitution, once pampered, seemed ill-equipped for the harsh realities of self-reliance. I pictured her living a quiet, isolated life, haunted by the ghost of the grand existence she believed was her birthright. Unlike David, she never reached out. Her silence was more eloquent than any plea, a testament to her utter defeat and perhaps a glimmer of shame. I wished her well, in my own quiet way, hoping she might one day find a path to genuine contentment, however modest. The Thorne family respite became a vibrant hub of activity. Children's laughter echoed through the halls that Sarah had once meticulously curated for her own comfort. I often read stories to the younger residents, seeing their eyes light up with wonder, their innocent joy a powerful antidote to the cynical bitterness I had once known. These families, rebuilding their lives after adversity, taught me about resilience, gratitude, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. They were my chosen family, a testament to the fact that connection, purpose, and love could be found and forged anew, even in the twilight of one's life. As my years drew on, the estate itself seemed to breathe with a renewed purpose. The grand halls, once silent save for the hum of central air and the whispers of unseen house staff, now held the echoes of planning meetings for the foundation, the quiet rustle of research papers, and the occasional visits of beneficiaries sharing their stories. It was no longer a gilded cage, but a vibrant center of activity, a monument to a legacy earned through integrity, not inherited through greed. My mornings often began with a cup of tea in the sunroom, overlooking the expansive gardens, pondering the subtle shifts in the seasons, and reflecting on the journey of my life. I had started with nothing, built an empire, seen it nearly consumed by avarice, and then, from the ashes of betrayal, forged a legacy that far surpassed my wildest dreams. My silken vengeance was not about destroying my children, but about saving myself, about reclaiming my agency and redirecting my life's work towards a greater good. It was the ultimate act of self-preservation, cloaked in the elegant precision of legal justice. I had given my children the choice to live meaningful lives, cushioned by wealth, but they had chosen a path of self-entitlement. Their downfall was not my doing, but their own. I had simply removed the safety net. In doing so, I had freed them to face the consequences and, in turn, freed myself to live a life of profound and genuine peace. I often thought about the concept of inheritance. My children had sought only the financial inheritance, the tangible assets, but I had always intended to pass on something far more valuable, a legacy of hard work, integrity, and purpose. In their greed, they had forfeited the very lessons that would have allowed them to truly thrive. My true inheritance, I realized, was not the vast fortune I had accumulated, but the wisdom gained, the resilience demonstrated, and the profound peace I now carried within me. It was a wealth that could not be stolen, squandered, or betrayed. It was the wealth of a life fully lived, on my own terms, with dignity and unwavering purpose. As the twilight of my own life began to softly descend, I knew I would leave this world not with bitterness, but with a heart full of gratitude for the journey, for the lessons, and for the profound, lasting peace I had finally found. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak trees on the lawn. I closed my eyes, a faint smile on my lips, ready for whatever quietude the evening, and indeed life's ultimate horizon might bring. My story, Elia's Thorn story, was complete, a testament to resilience, redemption, and the elegant, enduring power of true justice.